Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legend of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are going to be looking at cards that might be nerfed in the upcoming balance patch and seeing the likelihood of how, likely it is that they will get nerfed. So I have a list here of all the cards that I thought are probably up for some debate. There might be a couple others that you might put on here, but I think I've hit the main ones certainly. And yeah, I thought we'd go in, talk about them, and see whether I think they will or will not be nerfed. And there will be a video tomorrow doing a similar thing, but instead for buffs. So probably harder to predict. Obviously there's a much bigger sort of category, so I might not do it in this way. We might just talk about certain things, because of course there are a lot of things that could be buffed. But when it comes to nerf, I think these things are definitely probably in the main consideration. So we're just gonna dive in straight away and get right into it, starting with Golden Ages. It looks like these have been put in alphabetical order for me. So with that said, let's dive in and see where we think that they are. You can see we've got 5 categories. So certain, definitely be nerfed. Probable means that I'm expecting a nerf, but there is a small chance that maybe it won't be. Maybe is like the real 50-50. Like, will they nerf it? Will they not? Maybe. Who knows? That's what maybe means. Unlikely, obviously, is they aren't going to be nerfed, most likely, but maybe there could be a nerf. We probably aren't expecting it, but it's possible. And no obviously means that I would be shocked, really shocked, if they did actually nerf this card. So let's dive in and see where we put these different cards. So let's start with Golden Ages, and if we're doing Golden Ages, we probably should talk about Relentless Pursuit at the same time, because obviously they fall into kind of a similar category. Obviously both rally cards often get played together, and I doubt they would nerf one without nerfing the other. It would almost be interesting if they did, though, because that would, if Golden Ages went to 5 mana but Pursuit stayed at 3, that might be almost a sort of like way of kind of balancing things, saying there's a certain amount of rally effects in the game, but not too many good ones. Like, that could be an interesting way to go about things. But I don't think that they would. I think they'd hit both if they were going to hit both, which would be a pretty big hit to Demacia, but maybe warranted. And I think that one of the main benefits of, nerfing both of these cards is it's a way of making Katarina more relevant. If Katarina becomes the best rally effect in the game, then at least she has something. At least that is something that then you could warrant playing Katarina if she did become the best rally effect in the game. Unfortunately for Katarina, she is not, and I think that is her main problem. That there's just a better rally effect, even if it is in a different region. There's a rally effect in a region that can utilize them very well. Why would you play Katarina? And I think that's her main issue. So, with that said, do I expect Golden Ages and Relentless Pursuit to be nerfed? Probably not right now. I think what I'm going to do for these two is probably put them in the unlikely category. I don't expect it, but one day I could definitely see it. Potentially if there was ever a deck that, really utilized these and, a very strong kind of Demacia deck, I wouldn't be shocked if, like, the Demacian side of whatever comes with Poppy comes out. And, potentially if they didn't touch Poppy and, there was just a Demacia deck that just rolled with Poppy and whatever else it was, I wouldn't be shocked then at that point if they started looking at these cards, because I would expect that, that kind of deck would utilize these cards very well. But for now, I'm putting them at unlikely, but I'm not putting it at no, because I could see it. It's the kind of thing that I think that they might believe in, particularly if they do want to make Katarina better. If they are focusing in on Katarina, which I have no expectation that they are, but if they were for whatever reason, then this might be one of the things that they do to potentially help Katarina. Like, if we're getting a Katarina buff, which again, I'm not saying that is going to happen, not at all. But if we did get a Katarina buff and we, they were looking to also help in some other way, this could be one way that they do it. So I'm going to put it unlikely for now. But now we move on to Aloof Travelers. And this one, honestly, I think I'm going to put in certain. It's maybe probable, to say I'm certain on any of these is a bit maybe of a stretch. But we've heard Ruben Zoo talk about aloof travelers before. We've heard from Riot themselves that they kind of, you know, a stat nerf to aloof travelers is probably forthcoming. Whether it becomes a 2/4 or a 3/3, either way, it's probably coming. And for the devs to have said that, which they have, it's pretty much as certain as we can be. Maybe it will come, not in this patch and in the next patch or whatever. That's a possibility, I guess, but it will get nerfed at some point. I am certain of that. And so aloof travelers will be going in the certain. And we pretty much can expect that it's going to be either a 4-mana 3/3 or a 4-mana 2/4. Either way, something will happen to this card. I am fairly certain of it. Moving on to Draven. And if it was me, Draven would be up here. But I unfortunately, for whatever reason, don't think that is coming. And unfortunately for me, I might even put Draven in no. I think he's between unlikely and no. Will they nerf Draven? They could. Oh, I could see it though. I could see it. I'm gonna put Draven in unlikely. I think I could definitely see them just hitting Draven slightly. Taking his initial axe off summon, something like that, which I actually think would be a really good change. I think Draven has got to the point where people have kind of noticed that Draven has been around forever in tier 1 decks. I was very early on this. I thought, I've been beating this drum for like what feels like forever at this point, but it's probably been about 4 to 5 months. Saying that Draven's been tier 1 for too long. We're still now 4 to 5 months in the future, and it still is the case. So I think, the devs are probably aware Draven is very strong and has been very strong. And even with, the kind of noticeable power creep we've seen in the Bando City expansion, Draven has survived that completely. Just showing how absolutely insane he's always been. And so I think Draven probably is on their radar, but I'm not sure that they'd do it just yet. I could almost see it coming like in the next patch rather than this one, but maybe it could be an unlikely. But yeah, we'll see. And our next one is Gangplank, which is kind of, I would say, on a similar level, but like a lesser extent for Gangplank, where Gangplank has been in tier 1, but like high tier 2/tier 1 decks for a very long time now. And I think people have, sort of accepted that Gangplank is just a pretty good champion that, does quite well. Like, he has a very strong leveled up version, sorry, and he is pretty decent as just 5-mana 5/5 overwhelm that gets you a keg. Like, it's fine, and fits pretty well with the regions. And so Gangplank is pretty strong and has been for quite a bit of time. But I don't think he's on the level of Draven, and I don't think people are fed up with Gangplank. I don't think there's anyone out there like me who's kind of fed up with Draven. I think Gangplank is probably one of the better designs in all of Runeterra. Like, what annoys me with Draven is, like, you never really level him up, and it doesn't really matter to level him up, whereas Gangplank is much the opposite, where leveled up Gangplank will win you the game, and normal Gangplank is, like, fine. That's how I would want the champion's design, so I think a lot of people love Gangplank, me included, and I don't think Gangplank has been, dominant enough for long enough to warrant being nerfed. So I'm going to put Gangplank in the no category. On we go to Loping Telescope, and this is one where it probably depends what you consider a nerf to be, because if we're considering Loping Telescope getting nerfed in the fact that it won't be able to get itself, then I think we can probably put this in certain, and I think that would count as a nerf, because often, like, one of the best things you can get from Loping Telescope is another Loping Telescope. So I think that would count as a nerf. Maybe you wouldn't count it as a nerf. So Loping Telescope is a bit of an interesting one. I'm gonna put it in certain because I'm fairly certain that they will change that is some, Loping Telescope not getting Loping Telescope and other similar effects not being able to get themselves. I'm sure that that's something that they are going to do. And I would consider that a nerf, so I will put it in there. In terms of other thing that they could change on Loping Telescope, like, a lot of people have complained about the epic side of it, the fact that you can never really play around whatever the epic is. Like, it could be literally anything from, like, a Ruination to a Feel the Rush, like, and the different ways you should, play the game depending on what epic it is that you have no idea what it is. Like, it's very, very different, and you can never really know, and that's kind of the problem. So, will that change in time? Possibly. I wouldn't expect that to change this patch, but definitely the fact that it can't get itself, I'm pretty certain that that will become fairly soon. As we move on to Lost Soul, and Lost Soul is another one that I'm not certain of, but I'm gonna put in probable. I think that this is one where I'm expecting a nerf, like I'm very much expecting it. They could hit different, like if they hit Draven and like Scion, for instance, instead, then maybe they'd leave Lost Soul alone. I don't know. I think it's most likely though that they will hit Lost Soul in that deck, but I'm not certain of it. They could hit other things. There are other things that could be nerfed instead. So I'll put it in probable for now. I don't think that this is like a certainty, but it definitely deserves enough. I'm sure, like, for me personally, this is probably more deserving enough than Aloof Travelers, in my opinion. Lost Soul is just a really, really broken card that essentially just gives you so much value, and kind of says to your opponent, the longer this game's go, I can, you're just saying to your opponent, I can do this forever. Basically, with Lost Soul is often what it feels like, and so yeah, I would definitely nerf it. I'm happy with the probable distinction though. Moving on to Bando City Mayor, and this is another interesting one. Obviously one that's probably high on people's radar and people's list. This is probably one that goes in between certain and probable. Mayor, of course, is high on people's wanting to be nerf list, and of course it's a very, very, very powerful card that feels like you have to remove it as soon as it comes down. And even then, it's generated you a card. Like, it's super, super strong, right? But it's just whether it's certain or probable. Will they definitely nerf Mayor? I'm not really convinced that they will, so I think I am going to put him in probable. I'll put him at the top of probable. Just because I do think is more likely than Lost Soul, even. I'm not certain, basically, because again, they could hit different things. They could hit different Bando City things rather than Bando City Mayor. I do think it's probably the most likely thing that they will hit, because I think you could make this a 2-1 very easily, and people would be like, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good nerf. Yada yada yada. I think people would be okay with that. But yeah, it is obviously a very strong card, but they could hit other things. They could hit Poppy, they could hit a bunch of things within Bando City. To be honest, they could hit all sorts. Really, and try and leave Mayor alone, because if they feel like it's one of those cards that should be very strong within the region, that does what the region kind of is asking for a lot of, I could see that they leave it alone for that reason, that they want this to be a staple card of the region, maybe. But obviously it is a very strong card that I think we're probably expecting a nerf from. On now to Morph, and Morph is an interesting one because if you watched like the progress day with Steve Rubin on and stuff like that, it seemed like he was accepting of the idea that Morph would eventually be nerfed, but maybe not right now. So I think for that reason, I am going to put it in maybe, where I'm not sure how certain the devs are. I think it will come down to whether the devs can find a solution to Morph that they like early enough. If they in these last couple of weeks, found like a solution for Morph that they're pretty happy with, then I think it probably will get changed. If, they can't, if it's something that they, are still working on finding exactly what they want to do with the card, then it probably won't. So I'm going to put it in maybe, because I think it is a card that will change at some point. But it's just when it changes, and it's just, how they decide to go about it. And I think basically based on how quickly they find a change that they're happy with, that is when we will get the change. Moving on to Nami, and this one, again, very, very interesting. Am I willing to say that I'm certain that Nami will change? Yikes, I don't know. When it comes to champions, there's always kind of a bit of a doubt, because, I feel like they don't want to nerf champions a lot of the time. I think that Nami is probably in the probable category. The spell mana thing and stuff like that. But again, the problem with this one is that they could definitely hit other things. Other things on this list. We've only got 6 things left, but 3 of them relate to potentially this deck. Things that they could nerf instead. And, that's a possibility that they, leave Nami alone, but nerf other aspects of the deck because they want their champions to be good. That is definitely one thing that could happen, but I do think changing Nami and just, making the level up, like, even if it was just 8 instead of 7 so that you couldn't get that level up on the turn 4, even if that was just not possible, I think that would be, oh, well, it would be possible with, like, a tune and stuff, but, it'd be much harder to do. Even something as simple as that, I think, would be, welcome by everyone, and it wouldn't take much. And so I do think that that's probably the most likely thing that they will do. But I'm not, 100% convinced that they will or won't. It kind of, will depend on exactly the way that they want to go, on their philosophy of, when a champion needs balancing versus when, balance followers. Because I feel like that they would rather go with followers and spells first, and then look at champions second if possible. But obviously Nami maybe fits into the category of, like, this does need a nerf. Speaking of champions that pretty much almost certainly need a nerf, we come to Poppy. Poppy is an interesting one because she's one of those champions where, like, how do you nerf this card? Probably the easiest way would be to make Poppy a 3/3. I don't think you can decrease the health. I think that would make Poppy unplayable. Well, maybe not unplayable, but make her a lot worse, right? She'd go from, like, a top 5 champion in the game to, like, below average. Like, that's a massive slide for Poppy, I feel like, and I don't think that they would do that. So, but making her a 3/3 feels kind of like, it feels a bit bad. Like, she very rarely levels up. So you can't really even nerf that because you have to nerf sort of the first form of the card where she gets so much value. It's a very tough one, will they actually nerf Poppy? Because there are other things that you could hit in some of those decks. Obviously Mare is a pretty obvious one up there anyway. So Poppy is like, I think Poppy is the definition of a maybe. Where I really have no idea. Like, obviously, I think most people would agree that Poppy, like, will Poppy be nerfed one day? Yes, I could almost certainly say that one day Poppy will be nerfed. But will this be this time, or will they wait for, the other side of Demacia to come out and then not to dominate the game, and then us all get fed up of that? Very likely, I think. So I'm going to put Poppy in maybe. I wouldn't be shocked if they did. I would not be shocked if they didn't. I feel like Poppy is the definition of a true maybe. Now we move on to Sharp Sight, and this one is kind of interesting. Sharp Sight's one of those spells, again, I mean, I could have put Troll Chant on here, but obviously with Freljord struggling so much, I would be shocked if they did that. But Sharp Sight, obviously very strong, and has been, forever. And if they wanted to hit Demacia, they very much could. But Sharp Sight, again, I feel like it's a very difficult spell to balance. Like, how would you make this slightly worse? Maybe give it 1 attack instead. But I do feel that this is very unlikely. So I'm bordering between no and unlikely for whether they'd nerf Sharp Sight. I think I am going to go with no, though. I can't put it on this side of Gangplank. I'm going to put it at the top of no. Where I don't think that they would. It would be an odd change, I think. I don't think Demacia, like, deserves it, to be honest. I think Demacia is fine, it's pretty good, but I think there's kind of more specific things, like, maybe they would hit I think they're more likely to hit the rallies than they are Sharp Sight, to be honest. I think that rally is something that's, like, very specific and kind of, it's very Demacian in its form, at least now, because kind of the only rally cards that really see play, and it's very specific to Demacia. And so if you wanted to fix that problem within Demacia, I think you'd target the rallies rather than taking away, like, a card that would get played, in all Demacia decks, like Sharp Sight, where, Lux needs a Sharp Sight. There's plenty all the Demacian champions, need Sharp Sight. Not all of them need rally, and the kind of, decks that are good in Demacia right now are using these. Whereas all the Demacia decks kind of Sharp Sight, so I wouldn't expect them to. But now we move on to Fleet Admiral Shelley. Another interesting one, really, because, again, it comes down to, are they going to nerf Nami? Are they going to nerf Shelley? Are they going to nerf both? I don't know. This is probably the hardest kind of deck, I think, to sort of talk about. Because, like, the Draven Scion one, right? I feel like Lost Soul is kind of the easy one for them to go for. Like, it's a card that everyone would agree probably needs a nerf. It's a card that, like, everyone can get on board with. Whereas the Nami deck, like you'd get different answers from people. I think most people would probably go with Nami, but some definitely would go with Shelley as well. And they could go with both. I wouldn't be shocked. So I'm going to put Shelley right now, probably in the maybe category. Because they might just hit Nami and see how it goes. They might hit both. You know, it's very possible they could hit both, but I'm not certain. But they also could not hit Nami, and then Shelley, like, if you told me, like, Chris, they're definitely not nerfing Nami, like, trust me, I have inside information, Nami's staying the same, then I'd probably bet that Shelley would be, like, a certain. So it kind of depends, you know, on which way they're feeling. So I'm going to put Shelley in the maybe. Moving on to Scion, and a very interesting one here because, you know, if they do hit Minimorph, maybe they'll feel like, well, that's Scion's biggest counter. So do we need to change Scion now as well? Could be. I don't know. And how would you change Scion? You'd probably, again, just make the level up a bit harder. At least that's what I would do. So, you know, would you change Scion? I think I'm going to put Scion in the top of unlikely. He could be a maybe. I'm going to put him in the top of unlikely. Again, I feel like Lost Soul is kind of the easy out. Lost Soul is kind of the easy, like, you know, this is the card that needs to change in those kind of decks. So I just feel like they will nerf Lost Soul, but, you know, Scion might get away with it for that reason. And the thing is with these decks, you know, and the reason why, you know, I've complained about Draven a long time, but a lot of other people haven't, is because people are kind of okay with that kind of style of deck. You know, and that always tends to be the case. You know, people don't like playing against aggro decks like a Poppy deck or something like that. People don't like playing against these combo decks like Nami that can get off really quick. You know, if you look at the decks that frustrate people the most, it's never mid-range. Mid-range is the one archetype that, you know, people are just happy to play against. You know, whether it was like Shen Fiora that, you know, was really, really good for a long time. Eventually Fiora got nerfed, but more because of the all-in Fiora decks, not even because of Shen Fiora. You know, those kind of decks are just allowed to exist for ages if they're a mid-range deck. You know, you think of like Plunder mid-range, it's why I'd put Gangplank in no, because people are fine with it being good because it's a mid-range deck and you feel like you always have a chance no matter what you're playing. You don't feel like, oh, I just got run down and I had no chance. Oh, they just got their combo off on turn 4, well done. They just got the Exodia hand and just killed me straight away. You know, oh, they just had all the answers for every single thing I did and, you know, I couldn't play the game. None of that happens with mid-range. With mid-range, you always get that back and forth, pretty much no matter what deck you're playing. You know, you could be playing aggro and, you know, you get a bit of a game. You could be playing mid-range versus mid-range, and obviously that's a game. You know, you can potentially control them out against mid-range because they're not going too fast for you. You know, against combo, you know, you both got time to sort of set up, and it's sort of who can, you know, get that win condition off the quickest. Like, there's plenty of things that mid-range will play against decently well, but people aren't fed up of it because, you know, it never feels like they have all the answers to everything you're going to do. And so I feel like that's the reason that Draven's going to exist for a while. And so I think that these kind of decks, like Draven, Scion, that kind of thing, you know, are allowed to sort of live, you know. When they're winning the game on like turn 8, maybe turn 9 with Scion. I mean, sometimes it'll be turn 7, but, you know, I'd say mostly turn 8s and 9. You know, people are okay with that. You know, you've had a chance to sort of, you know, execute a large portion of your game plan. You've had a game of Runeterra, and I think that that's psychologically important and why these decks kind of tend to stay under the radar a bit. So I wouldn't expect Scion to be nerfed, basically for that reason. As we move on to Sparklefly, and another one that, again, you know, these last two, Zoe and Sparklefly, are kind of in this range, right, with Nami and Shelley, where it's going to depend. What do they want to hit in this deck? Because I think that they will hit something, but I don't know what it is, and they do have different targets, and Sparklefly is one of them. But I think Sparklefly, you know, I think people and the devs understand that Targon is one of the weaker regions. You know, I do think that this package with Zoe, Sparklefly, you know, like, you know, all the spells that protect things is pretty decent and sees play, you know, in Lee Sin as well as Nami Zoe, and is pretty strong, you know, and I don't think that they would want to maybe nerf Targon too much. You know, I think that Targon will be buffed in some way, but I think also they wouldn't want to, you know, take away what is, you know, sort of the one little package that Targon already has, just in case the buffs don't go right. So I'm going to put Sparklefly in unlikely. It could happen, you know, they could make it a 1-1, and people have pointed out that, you know, the 4-mana Kinku Lifeblade The 4 mana 2/2, you know, elusive lifesteal one. Like, why is this just such a much better version of it? You know, change that back or change Sparklefly to be a 1/1. Either way, like, you know, so there are some calls potentially to nerf Sparklefly, but I do think it would be unlikely. And finally, last but not least, we have Zoe. And Zoe, for me, goes into the no category as well. Only just ahead of Gangplank because Zoe, I think, is quite annoying. Just in her way, but I would be shocked if Zoe got nerfed. One, how do you even nerf Zoe, really? Like, Zoe is a very difficult card to nerf because most of her value comes in her level 1 form. So, you know, doing anything to the level up or the level 2 condition doesn't really change much. And she's a 1 mana 1/1, so stats wise, you can't really do much. She has a Nexus Strike ability. If you take away elusive, she becomes useless. Like, you can't really make a 2 mana, really. It doesn't really fit with the character. I honestly can't even think of a way you could nerf Zoe. I literally can't. Maybe take away the reducing of the cost by 1 if you get another Nexus Strike. I don't know. Like, it's really, really hard to nerf Zoe in general without kind of going for more of a rework angle. So I would be shocked. And I think Zoe, honestly, is one of the best design champions of the game, alongside Gangplank. I love, you know, the design of both these champions. They are, like, the right power level. You know, that they can turn up in tier 1 decks, but, you know, they maybe aren't carrying that deck like a Nami would, for instance. They aren't like the sole reason that the deck wins. No, they're just a good card that you can put in a lot of different decks. And so, to me, these are both just good designs, and I don't expect them to be nerfed. So this is my table of how I would do it. Interested to see what you guys think, because, you know, it's very possible you have either different ideas or maybe more information than me. You know, or you've heard different things than me, you know, that, oh, the devs have said that, you know, Chris Minimorph is definitely changing. Very possible, and, you know, I haven't heard everything from the devs, you know, I'm not part of that team, so you might have some more news for me, so please let me know. But as I say, buff video on this kind of style will be coming tomorrow. And I hope you've enjoyed this video, and, you know, maybe there might even be cards that I've missed, to be honest, because I just kind of went through, like, you know, a tier list and sort of looked at the best decks and sort of went through it. So it's possible I've missed a card or two. Off the top of my head, I can't remember any that I've missed, but maybe I have. Let me know. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a really nice day.